Okay, so let's have a closer look at the section on the process of desalination.
Well, I just need to outline the principle of the process, don't I?
Yes. You need to explain first what desalination means.
Well, I want to start by referring to a natural form of desalination. And to say that a seabird filters salt out of seawater in its throat.
Okay, that's interesting. So they just spit the salt out, do they?
Yes.
Right, that's a good introduction. Then you can go on to describe the mechanical process.
Yes, well, the first stage is the collection. It involves a large plant that collects the water. Actually, it goes through a canal, and that passes the water into the plant, which treats it, you know?
Removes all the rubbish.
Yes.
So the treatment's the second stage. What happens next?
Well, the next stage is that it goes through a lot of pipes until it reaches the point where the salt is removed.
Okay, so that's the next point on your chart.
Yes. I can talk about this quite a lot. The salt's separated from fresh water.
Right. The water passes through a membrane.
Not exactly. That's the whole thing. The seawater has to be forced, pumped, and a lot of pressure is involved.
You need to make that point. Explain that the water doesn't go freely.
No, because the salt is heavy. This is the really expensive part of the process.
Okay. So after that, what happens?
Well, there's some more treatment after the high-pressure filtering process, but eventually the system produces fresh water.
Okay. It might be good to mention what's left over.
Salt, and that's a really big problem.
Where does it go?
After the desalination process, the substance that remains, it's called brine, it's a very salty substance and it goes back, usually into the sea. It's not good for fish, though. It damages marine life.
Well, you can discuss that in the next section of your presentation.
Yeah. So, anyway, a lot of the fresh water that's produced is used for human consumption.
Yes, and?
It's also used for irrigation, for watering farmland.
Great. Well, you've mentioned some of the disadvantages there.
But how can you get involved? How can you begin to write articles which will be published on sites like these? Well, first you must have something interesting to say, something you want to communicate with readers. Assuming you have this, it's important in an article to attract people's attention and gain their interest. So put the main facts first, answering these questions: who, why, when, how, and where. Get those basic facts down to start with and get people interested. Then fill in the details in the rest of the article. The best model is really shaped like a pyramid. You put the most important facts at the top of the article and lots of smaller details down below. Remember, you want people to keep reading, so you need to hold your readers' interest. A really good technique for doing that is to put in quotations from people who are part of the story, what they really said. You know the sort of thing. Tanya, mother of two, said, "It all happened so quickly that we didn't have time to react." Quotations bring the article alive. Once you've written your article, go over it again to make sure that any figures you quote are correct. Make sure that Tanya really has 2 children and not 1 or 3. Then, after that, once you've got your ideas down, rewrite your article, making sure that your paragraphs don't contain more than 3 sentences. People like them to be brief and to the point, and this will help to hold their attention. And another thing to bear in mind, if they're reading online, people will soon stop reading your piece and start reading something else. So keep the whole article brief. Don't put in a conclusion. Just let your article end without it. Another good piece of advice is to remember that old cliché which we've all heard, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's true, so if you can, include a picture. It'll attract more attention and illustrate what you've been saying. Finally, you need to write a headline. Something eye-catching which will get people to just skim the article to start with, and then, if it's well written, they'll read it more carefully afterwards.
Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Right, so let's design a plan. What ideas have you got so far?
Well, I wondered about doing something about relationships in the wild first. Maybe starting with animals.
That's quite a good idea, but I think the very first thing you need to do is give a definition of what you mean by your key terms.
Oh, so I need to say what terms like relationship mean?
Yeah. You could just do a diagram, like you do when you brainstorm something.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll do that first.
Right. After that, you could do a bit of background on the animal world. Yes, a quick look at relationships among ape groups would work.
Yeah, interesting. Just to show that relationships are part of life. So that's the definition and background. What next?
Well, then you have to move on to people. Are you going to target a particular age group or something else?
Well, I thought that first I would look at different... Well, there are so many places, aren't there, where we form relationships? In the office...
Yeah, within the family. Even toddlers aged 18 months or under have relationships.
Yeah, so I'll present those.
You mean the contexts for relationships?
Yes, that's the word.
You do have to find a way to limit the scope of the study.
Yeah, I could examine the 21 to 30 age group.
Or the next thing might be to select one type of relationship and go with that.
Good idea. I'll pick friendship and look at what makes that type of relationship work and...
Well, why don't you go through the stages in a friendship? But I would keep it simple. Just select 6.
6. Okay. I guess I could fit my practical work in here.
Yes. It's the sort of area that you can canvass people's opinions on. It might be good to get some opinions from people over the age of 60.
And, as a contrast, why don't I end by looking into the future? Maybe the future changes in...
Yeah, or better still, the influences, with all the social networking that goes on now.
Okay, influences. Oh, that's been such a help, Victor. Thanks so much.
No problem. I'd better go and get some work done myself.